This week on the Virtual Skeptics, Bob emits a foul odor. How is that news? Eve doesn't drink wine, apparently. Barb fails to put in a joke. And Tim is spreading rumors on Twitter. Again, I'm your host, Brian Gregory. And if I had any superpower, I'd want the ability to turn off internet comments. This is the Virtual Skeptics again. Hi, how was your Thanksgiving? Mine was pretty good. How was yours? Yeah, really? Good. Awesome. Oh, I was talking to those guys.
It was turkey
filled. You guys. Yes. Lots
We're
of
not
turkey.
playing Romper Room?
Yeah.
Mine was great.
Barbara and Eve and Bob. Oh. I thought that was just in D.C. they had that. Was it Romper Room a local thing? Oh, no. This is Virtual Skeptics. Thanks for watching. I'm going to do this stuff and that stuff. We got other people here, and I'm going to introduce them. So let's do that. First off, we got Bob Blaskiewicz.
Kill me.
Yes. Kill him.
Please
CSI's conspiracy guy, web columnist, blogger for Skeptical Humanities, and Skepticality contributor. Then we have Edward. Eve Siebert.
There was an accident with the internet and a wormhole. Or something.
Yes. And no. Okay. The 17th, was it 17th Earl
17th Earl of Oxford, yes.
Yes, there you go. Editor and blogger at Skeptical Humanities and contributor to Skepticality and Insight with no S at skeptic.com. Up next, Barbara Drescher, former psychology instructor, blogger at ICBS Everywhere, which I love that name, and contributor to numerous skeptical projects, including Insight with no S at skeptic.com and The Odds Must Be Crazy. And finally, Tim Farley, blogger at SkepTools and Insight with no S at skeptic.com, Skepticality contributor, creator of What's the Harm .net, and former JREF fellow. Wow, I only stuttered once. There you go. This is a thing. We do this thing, and you guys watch this thing, and if you want to add anything to this thing, then post a thing on the Twitter with hashtag Virtual Skeptics. Excuse me.
Is that a thing now?
Yes, that's a thing. Or on the YouTube, you can comment if you make sure we're aware it's a question. Or I don't know if I activated the Q&A app. I'm sorry if I did not. But if it's working, go ahead and try that because what the hell, it might work. So let's do the starting thing. What's the starting thing? Oh, we've got trivia question.
Oh,
Bam!
yeah.
Bam! Trivia question. Tim's got a trivia question. What's your trivia question, Tim?
This one should be easy. I think you guys will get it pretty quickly. Name a British skeptic who wrote the two books, well, at least two books that I know of. One is called Bad Science, and the other one is called Bad Pharma.
That one's a little too easy.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Bad question?
Name that skeptic.
Bad skeptic. Oh. No, he didn't write Bad Skeptic. The secondary quiz this week is there's two movies behind me. And they are two movies that are on my every year Christmas watching list as a secret little hint. But if you can name both of them, I will give you a special prize. A very special prize. And guess what? I get to go first. Yay! Where's my music? Do 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 do. Yay! We're gonna learn about robots. We haven't had no robots. We've had no robots for 2 weeks, so I'm going to be freaking everyone out. First thing. This has been in the news for the last couple of weeks. First off, there was a big. Actually, the conference was back in October. It was a big tech conference for robotic stuff in Japan back in October. But the Toshiba, which cannot be outdone by other companies that make technology stuff, decided they were going to showcase their brand new spanking new Uncanny Valley robot, which is this thing right here.
Terrafolia.
Terrafolia? No, not Terrafolia.
I'm terrafoliafied.
Terrafoliafied? I am too. Her name is Akio, And she was originally developed as a sign language robot.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's got like some 48 servos, 43. Most of them are in the arms and the fingers in order so they can kind of articulate the different symbols. Now, to me, knowing very little about a little bit about sign language, it looks like even the movement is kind of generalized, and I don't know if it's specific to. I mean, I assumed it was English. It wasn't in the article whether or not that it's English sign language. I assume that there's other language sign language. But one thing is for sure, she's freaky.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know what it is with I mean, Honda's got a bunch of humanoid robots. There's a couple of other experimental robots that have been out there that are humanoid form, and Disney's been making these animatronic things. I mean, have you been to the Hall of Presidents?
Yeah.
In Disney World.
Yeah.
I mean, especially recently. Like I saw it since they've added Obama. So, and his movements are pretty fluid. Now I understand that.
Wow, this one is really another level of creepitude.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, or they can't get. I mean, maybe it's because they're programmed motions for a entertainment like the Hall of Presidents. They do the same thing over and over again. Well, this is supposed to be generalized for any kind of speech. So maybe there's something in that allows them to make the movements more fluid.
Is it a physical limitation? Is it like the spacing of servos, or
Well, I mean, clearly, clearly there are examples of machines that look really realistic, and I'm assuming that in the case of producing something that does the same motions in a show, you can repeat those and tweak the motions until they look really natural. But a generalized machine, one that's supposed to be able to do speech, any kind of speech you program it to, like the sign language, they have to have a certain set of behaviors and then build up what they're trying to say based on some kind of general vocabulary. And maybe they can't tune that as well. I don't know, but the Uncanny Valley thing is totally going.
If you can ever weaponize the Uncanny Valley, we don't have a chance.
That's true. That's true. But the good news is that if any, they can't yet hide a military weapon inside something that looks humid either.
Or humid.
Yeah, or humid, because
That's good news.
would be. Yeah, it's really stuffy in here, and I'm gonna die from the robots. I don't know. That's a stretch. Okay, so next one. Apparently there are Daleks now. Daleks.
I know.
Look at that. Look at that thing. Let me hit the go button on this. It's so scary when this thing gets moving. Wow, look, it's coming at us right now. That thing is just so intimidating. Yes. Wow. And the guy just walks past him.
I wanted to follow him, turn and follow. Oh my God! It has eyes in all directions.
Yes. Well, yeah.
It's a little panopticon.
Yeah, that's a nice reference, by the way. This thing was in the news a couple weeks back because, and actually, it was pointed out to me by one of our regular. Let me see. Let me get the right reference correct. One of our regular watchers. Nathan. Yes, of course it was Nathan. Wanted to send.
It was a robot.
Yeah, apparently Microsoft had deployed these on their compound on the West Coast, and it got in the news because I don't know, someone thought they looked like Daleks. Yeah, it's their Silicon Valley campus, so it's not the one further north, but. Apparently, this is only part of a demonstration by a company called Nightscope. Nightscope produces these robots. They're called the K5, and they're 5 foot tall, 300-pound, essentially a computer with a bunch of cameras on it. And the idea is that they're kind of designed to patrol parking lots and assess possible threats and notify somebody to react if something happens. Like it's supposed to be smart enough to say, well, is that group of teenagers hanging around here, are they a threat? Or maybe that guy shouldn't be climbing in that window.
Pull up those pants.
Yes. It has no offensive capability. It has really nothing that it can do besides a piercing siren. And it's supposed to only use that in cases of someone maybe assaulting it or in its way.
So
or,
it cries like a child?
Non-compliant. Yeah, apparently yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. It is just a big robot baby. But the idea is that this is supposed to be cheaper than paying a person to do this, which, why most robot jobs are nowadays. And they could possibly deploy a bunch of them. Microsoft responded to this article saying that this was just a part of a temporary demonstration, and they didn't have any future plans of actually deploying these at their campuses. But hey, it may show up at New York City parking lots or something like that. They have a demo video which is quite humorous. I'll link to that in the show notes that tries to make them look really dangerous and failing. But there you go. You might have piercing egg-shaped robots roaming around protecting your car someday soon. Okay. Last story, SpaceX. You guys know who SpaceX is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really, really cool commercial space company that's actually been doing some successful stuff. One of their programs is a Falcon 9 rocket. This thing is designed to be reusable. It's designed to both power up into orbit and then power down and land on the spot. Now, here's this is one of their demo videos they had online. I'll let this play. I'll skip forward because it's kind of long. But the idea is this thing. Here we go. It launches like a normal rocket, and this test didn't go up very high, but it essentially comes back down under power and lands. And in this video, it lands pretty much where it took off from. This thing is completely automated, so it's essentially a rocket-shaped robot designed to go to orbit and back. This is like their new to orbit launch platform they're working on, and they recently came out with this. I think this was an interview with Elon Musk, talking about launching these and landing them on floating platforms that are essentially drone platforms. So here's a picture of one of these platforms, and essentially it's a big flat
Barb.
boat. Yes, and the idea is that this thing has GPS. It has its own control. It's essentially a big flat robot that floats. It would go out somewhere in the ocean that's safe. It would have the vehicle on it. It would launch. Go maybe rendezvous with the station or put something into orbit, come back down and land on top of it, completely automated. So, one, that's super cool. Two, it sounds kind of hard. Although they're talking about using this on their next station. They have a station resupply launch coming up before the end of the year. It says a couple weeks here, but I don't know the exact date. But they are going to attempt some of this, and it hasn't really been published what they're going to do, whether they're going to take it out and launch from one of this or try to maybe land on one as part of the experiment, because a lot of this stuff is, every time they launch, they're testing another aspect of it, and they're kind of like, well, this is an experiment. It could fail, and like this next one has about a 50% chance of failure, which is fine. They're going to collect a lot of data, and then the next one they do will be more reliable. But what they're trying to get to is to have this thing, they pack it up, it goes out by itself out in the ocean, launches the rocket, puts something in orbit, lands back down, and returns home. So it's completely automated with no humans involved. So, okay. Completely automated robotic launch capability within months. I'm just going to let that sit out there for a while.
Okay. So they're going to
Don't let them anywhere near the warheads.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is...
You don't need to land a warhead.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But I mean,
This-
who
this
knows?
lets you
I'm
rubbing
a
it-
little. I get the thing landing. What happens between, orbit level and down where you can be aerodynamic like that on the way down? Are they burning that rocket all the way back down, or do they
have
aerodynamic on the way down and then fire the rocket back up to land?
Yeah, I don't
That's
fully
interesting.
understand their reentry technology, but they have these, and they tried some of these on one of the more recent test flights. There are these wings they deploy that are around the outside that kind of allow it to decelerate in that first part before they have to ignite the burner. Now, I don't even know if they've gotten that far yet. I'm assuming if they're going to do a launch soon to the station, they're going to have to go through that problem. So,
Yeah.
that it's going to be cool. It's going to be something worth watching. Definitely. But yeah, robotic launch capability. So you never know. In within a year or so, maybe there'll be a couple of automated launches that SpaceX is going
Well,
to.
if you think about it, maybe this is if we can't live in harmony with the robots, maybe they'll be able just to go to Mars and leave us alone.
They can go visit
They
their
don't have to
buddies.
go to Mars. They're already there.
That's a good point.
They own that planet.
Right.
Oh shit.
They're early,
But I was thinking, it's really close to the fact. I mean, I can see a press conference happening maybe late next year. Elon Musk on TV going, "Well, we had 10 launches that happened this year that we don't know why they happened. It was completely automated. We didn't even build anything. It just kind of there was something put up in space and we don't know what it was." So.
It's just hiding.
That's what
something
I'm
from
thinking.
Somebody.
Oh.
Star
The
Wars.
robots steal someone's treasured item and put it into orbit just to be mean.
No, I don't. I'm just kidding. But it is kind of cool. And space. One last little thing I wanted to mention is tomorrow. Watch NASA TV tomorrow. I don't have the time in front of me, but tomorrow, late in the day, is scheduled the one of the test flights of the Orion capsule, the command module for
Yes.
the new manned space rocket. This is on a Delta rocket. It's not the actual Orion rocket, but it is the real command module, and they're going to be testing there's an escape system that's supposed to pull the human module away from the rest of the rocket in case of emergency, and this reentry. They're gonna actually have the thing come down through the atmosphere and test the heat shield and that kind of thing.
Now, my understanding is that Orion is a long time coming, a very, very long time coming, a post-shuttle cargo ship.
Yeah, it was originally. Yeah, back in I think it was it was George W. Bush that signed the Constellation program, which was the kind of Moon, Mars, and beyond program, which has been modified and rebudgeted and tweaked and changed a lot since then. And yeah, there was a time where we thought that like when the shuttle ended, there was a lot of talk that the Constellation program wasn't going to happen at all, but they reduced the budget and they extended the schedules.
Yeah. No, I just seem to remember when I was a kid, this is 20 years ago or more, I remember that they were already talking about trying to get something after the shuttle. What comes next?
Yeah, I mean...
I remember this because they told me this at space camp.
Yeah, there were a lot of next generation shuttle programs that came and did some experiments and then went. Before the Orion as well. I briefly worked on one called the X-33 that was supposed to be launched out of New Mexico somewhere and be able to come down and refuel there. And it was a really cool program that didn't actually happen. It was all experiment and R&D, and then the funding never happened. So,
what happens to that research once a program's canceled?
Well, if it's a NASA program, everything is freely available to everyone else in NASA. And if you are a contractor on a NASA program, there is access as well to depending on how that happens. So yeah, there's very good sharing of information. And then there's people like me that because I worked on it, I kind of know the technology, so I apply that to new projects as well. So
cool.
There you go. That's all I had this week, and not a whole lot that you should be scared of, but it does look like some things are starting to brew in the realm of robot death.
I guarantee someone's going to put a plunger on that Dalek.
Yes, someone is definitely. I can see maybe the first.
It's going to be me if I get a chance.
Yeah. If I see one of, if I'm going to New York this weekend, so if I go to New York and I see one of those wandering around a parking lot, I am definitely going to take a plunge to that thing.
Absolutely.
So, and take a picture and post it on the internet and get arrested.
It'll be worth it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So up next, Bob.
Am I up?
Bask in the weirdness is what I have in front of me. Bask in the weirdness.
This is a I don't have very much to talk about this week. I just have perhaps the most nasty thing that I could possibly come up with. Canada, which is normally a very sensible, polite nation, has really gotten on my short list lately. I mean, don't get me wrong, they earn some points when they sing the national anthem and finish it for us. But last time that we met, there was a girl whose parents were given permission by a judge to let her die of a potentially curable disease. This story is every bit as wrong and involves more rodents. So his name was Peter Wald. He was 51 years old. He was a diabetic. And in March of 2013, he had an infected foot with common, you lose sensation of your extremities, and infections, if they go unchecked, can become really bad for diabetics. Instead of seeing a doctor and getting a simple course of antibiotics, or actually probably more attention at that point than that, but Peter and his family prayed for a miraculous healing, which never happened. At some point in late March, he died, lapsed into a coma and died, but he wasn't like most dead people, thought his religiously deranged wife and the 13 other people who lived in the house, including 5 children and 7 adult friends. He was going to be resurrected, because I think this sometimes happens ever. So, when the 8 nominal adults were, for reasons unknown, unable to scrounge together the mortgage on the house they were living in, the sheriff found the deceased Peter Wald mummified in the upstairs bedroom, which had been sealed off a few days after his demise by his wife because of the whole rotting, decaying, bloating issue. Yeah. Also, there were rats eating him. According to the Hamilton Spectator, which reported on this entirely wrong thing, quote, expecting the eviction, the family packed the dead man's belongings and had his shoes and bags ready to go. That's how strong our faith, Kaling, Peter's wife, says. And she says this as if this is a good thing. And even I, one of the, just a ridiculous liberal, completely ridiculous liberal, starts wondering, how far does tolerance go? Following the revelation that Daddy had been moldering for months in the upstairs bedroom, the police were called. Child Services, or the Canadian equivalent thereof, stunningly found that there were no risk to the children, keeping them inside a den of certifiable lunatics, presuming that no child ever gets strep throat or appendicitis or anything. According to the Spectator, quote, the criminal charges originally laid in the case, neglect of duty regarding a dead body and offering an indignity to a body, were withdrawn and replaced with a single charge under the Coroner's Act. To this charge, the wife pled guilty. Again, according to the paper, quote, Kaling, who has no past criminal record, had her sentence suspended and was put on 18 months of probation in order to seek counseling around the public health concerns of the incident. And in my new favorite example of litotes, Kaling said, it was unusual, yes. It was certainly not normal, and we won't do that again. Laws exist, and we know that now. but she still believes strongly in resurrection and says there have been many documented cases of it around the world. Her faith was not shaken by the legal consequences, she says. In fact, it has cast me more at the mercy of God, because he is the ultimate judge, thus proving that they learned absolutely nothing. That's my story. And the description of them of these kids and a whole bunch of adults, it sounds like a cult to me. Am I wrong?
A lot of people think most religions are cults, so I don't know. It is cultish, but there's no leader, so it's hard to call it a cult. I think it's more of a...
Well, we don't have actually, I guess we don't have the social relationships sketched out for us. We don't really know what the dynamics are. But it is very strange.
It's very, very similar to stories that, that I've... many stories that I've heard of Christian scientists and, others who so strongly believe that God will heal them that they believe in resurrection. In fact, Lori Tarr posted shared that same story with a much worse, I thought, story of her own, that she knew somebody who allowed a woman who had had complications in previous pregnancies to deliver at home because they believed that God would, it was in God's hands, and both the mother and the baby died. And they believed they would be resurrected as well. So it was something like 3 days before they called anyone. It's a pretty, it's not an isolated incident.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of, I'm really surprised still. This is about as shocking as you get. And the prosecutor said they never found anything else like that in the Canadian law. Basically...
It's one for what's the harm, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh. It reminds me, and this was making the rounds again not so long ago. It was the Resurrection Team. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
The roving bands of Christians who kind of look like ghost hunters who are trying to raise the dead and may have.
Do they also work as plumbers during the day?
I don't know what they do.
It's kind of required to be a ghost hunter, I guess.
Yeah. But they wear the same black shirts and all their promotional material looks...
I think we talked about it on the show or something.
Yeah, way back in the day. And they were, driven by grief. I don't know about grief here. I just don't have access to that type of mindset. I don't think.
Pretty gruesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I've experienced on the ground the so to speak the whole faith healing thing, and there's some good books about that if you have no experience with it. But it seems to me like this is along the same lines, where people just, I mean, they really want it to be true, and they're. It's not just that their self-identity is wrapped up in this, which a lot of people's beliefs are the reason they hold on to them so strongly, is because their identity, their sense of self is tied into it, and you're not attacking my belief. You're not trying to show me that my belief is wrong. You're actually telling me that I'm faulty. You're insulting me as a person.
Oh, there's that strong idea that
But this is going further than that, though. I mean, it would require.
Well, they sound a lot like.
Hard to understand. Yeah.
When prophecy fails, it sounds a lot like that.
Yeah.
The cognitive dissonance is just like, well, you have to just embrace it even more, because otherwise, what does that entail, right? And it sounds like, I wonder if it goes from beyond belief to a sense of knowing, to feel like something is going to happen, that something is, you have that emotion where you peg the knowing emotion on it. I don't know.
Well, there are cases of people buying lottery tickets because they know they're going to win the lottery, all sorts of things like that. And I think there's a special kind of crazy that goes in there, but it's it's just not that unusual for people to be so obsessed that they're certain. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, in for a penny, in for a pound also.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, they've already committed to it, and they don't want to admit they're wrong because they've got so much invested in it. I don't know. I'm talking in emotional or personal sense, not just necessarily money, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did we lose Edward?
Edward DeVere.
Quite a while ago.
Yeah, right.
Was I talking about robots? Because that's what I totally forgot.
Yeah.
Yes.
While you were talking about robots.
I got an email
why
that
I missed
says
it.
it was fun while it lasted.
Ah.
Yeah, the internet at home is not all that good, and that's why I'm here at work.
Should have let her go first.
Yeah.
Hindsight, 2020.
Yep, hindsight. I was just so excited.
I believe that she's still here, though. I strongly, strongly believe that she is still here.
Yes.
That she will come back to the show.
Yes. And
I know this.
Okay, let's just... If we all just believe...
Pray to the Google gods.
Don't clap our hands.
This just feels so...
Put your hands on your Wi-Fi router.
God almighty.
And it's, you know what else? It's really, really easy to, when things don't go your way in those cases, to say that it was because your faith wasn't strong enough.
Yeah.
But I don't think in this case that their faith wasn't strong enough.
No.
If there was ever someone who could resurrect someone by using faith, it would be people.
I know. And the thing is it's not going to convince them.
Nope.
Yeah.
It's not. You're right.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna let Barb go next because and hopefully Eve can come back in.
Alrighty. Mine's actually pretty quick. I got this. Somebody shared this article today, actually this morning. It's a New York Times article that just got me so angry that I just had to talk about it. So this is a New York Times article about a school in Pompano Beach. Pompano Beach, Florida. And I just want to read you the opening 2 paragraphs because that's enough. Actually, I'm going to read a lot from the article just because there's so much in it. In one third-grade classroom, the walls are bordered by cheetah and zebra prints. Bright pink caddies hold pencils and glue sticks, and a poster at the front lists rules including act pretty at all times. Next door, cutouts of race cars and pictures of football players line the walls, and a banner behind the teacher's desk reads, Coach's Corner. Can you guess what's going on in this school?
Segregated by sex?
Segregated by sex is right. You guessed it.
Right ahead.
The girls are in one classroom and the boys are another, and that is insane. Not so much segregated classrooms, but you can see what happens when you segregate these students. So the article's actually pretty good. It says things like teachers recognize the importance of understanding that Angeline learns differently from Angelo. This is a quote from Angeline Flowers. I love how she used her own name in the quote. Principal of Charles Drew, one of several public schools in Broward County that offer single-sex classes. But the article also notes that this theory is generally held in low regard by social scientists, and that would be correct. Critics say that there is little evidence of substantial differences in brain development between boys and girls, and that dividing children by gender can reinforce entrenched stereotypes. That is also correct. There's really not a whole lot of good evidence that segregated classrooms help overall. I mean, there's a lot of cherry-picked data in this field, and the current trend, I think it reflects worries that this is actually something that they said in the article, that boys are falling behind girls, but boys are falling behind girls, which is a result of a focus on girls who used to be behind boys. So sort of like this pendulum swinging back and forth, right? They were worried that girls were falling behind in school. They weren't getting enough attention, so especially in science and math. And so they started spending more time on girls, and it turns out that girls actually are excelling in math and science ahead of boys, at least until the middle of high school, and probably today even beyond that, if you look at the numbers of girls in college. It's this thing that's you focus on one gender and the other gender falls behind, and that happens. But part of the problem is that, sorry, I need some water. As soon as you do that, as soon as you focus on one, you're going to neglect the other. And separating them is not the answer, in my opinion, especially when they justify the separation with things like boys and girls learn differently. There's really no good support for that. There's no good support for this idea that boys learn by doing this and girls learn by doing that. There's a lot of cherry-picked studies. One thing that they have found in some of these studies is that if you segregate the classrooms, same-sex classrooms, children excel, like they're more likely to go to college, or they do better in standardized tests. But there are even problems with those studies. For one thing, go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like the studies they had about they correlate performance in school with how many books they had at home. I mean, is it the same kind of?
There's a lot of that. There are the same challenges with studying it. I mean, whenever you study anything like gender, you've got confounding variables. But some of the studies that show that children in general excel in same-sex classrooms, they even if you're using random assignment, like somebody on Facebook argued with me that, well, there's a study where there was random assignment. Yeah, there was random assignment, but that can do a lot for a study, but it can't account for things like expectation and sexism. And if you look at same-sex students excelling, there are lots of explanations for that. There are lots of explanations for why girls might do better than boys in this, and boys might do it better than girls in another area, that have to do with expectation. They do have to do with sexism. Some of them do have to do with distraction, probably. There are some good explanations that, if boys and girls both excel in same-sex classrooms, then we should do that, or there's the opinion that we should do that. And my opinion is, if you don't understand why it's happening, if it is indeed happening, which is still up in the air, you're going about it the wrong way. I've kind of gotten off track, and I know I'm not making a lot of sense here, so let me backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
We know that boys and girls don't learn differently. There's not a lot of good support for gender differences in learning. There's not a lot of good support for significant gender differences in a lot of things that people assume are. And so what you end up doing is separating these kids and then feeding these stereotypes, in my opinion. And this article demonstrates that just in its opening paragraph. They're feeding a stereotype. That's not helping. Segregating kids may help them, or may end up with, say, more kids graduating college, but then it's not considering what's different about the classrooms that are being segregated.
Right.
There are probably a lot of things like expectation. These segregated classrooms tend to happen in private schools, tend to happen in parochial schools, but even in public schools, there are different things in the environment than just segregation of students. Even if segregating students removes distraction, kids are not just their academic performance. Let me read a little more from the article. Maybe it'll make a little more sense what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
Okay, so one psychologist at the University of Texas said that segregating by sex or any social category increases prejudice based on stereotypes, which I agree with. She said you say there's a problem with sexism, and instead of addressing the sexism, you just remove one sex. That's one problem there. That doesn't address it directly. If there are differences between boys and girls in learning or in gender segregated versus gender one-sex classrooms, you're not addressing the problem directly. If there are differences in expectations that maybe aren't sexist, but just people having wrong ideas about differences in how, gender differences in how we learn, that's not addressing the problem directly. The way to address that is to dispel the myth so that people don't treat girls differently than boys. When you remove the one sex from the classroom, you end up with things like this.
Is it going to be funny? I bet it's going to be funny.
Some of this is going to be hilarious, I think. Okay, but it's also anger-inducing. Supporters say girls have more in common with other girls, and boys with other boys than with the opposite sex of the same age. Okay, so let's just separate them, and then they don't have to deal with each other. Kids are more than their academic performance, and nobody lives in a bubble. We don't live in a segregated society. Kids need to learn to deal with each other.
Rich kids have more things in common with other rich kids than poor kids.
Exactly. And actually, one of these guys actually uses this as a defense. He said, we segregate on the basis of age, not based on any evidence. It was an utterly ridiculous...
That is a ridiculous statement. Wow.
Based on any evidence. No, we segregate based on where they are in their academic
experience. Yeah.
That happens to be correlated with age. This guy's a pediatrician. And he's the one who wrote Why Gender Matters, which I've heard criticized quite a bit. The training materials, there's a complaint, there have been lots of complaints, and some of them have been won, by the way, in different states, and some are still pending about this because it's actually a violation of civil rights in some cases. So the training materials noted that gently competitive lessons may be more impactful for boys, and that lessons that incorporate emotions and emotional vocabulary may have more impact for girls. Teachers were also advised to be more tolerant, for boys need to fidget, and girls need to talk during class.
Clearly, they have never met my daughter.
I know. I was like, okay, wait a minute. You'll like this next one.
Well, I admit that could be an outlier, but I'm just saying.
Listen to this one. I am able.
Let the girl talk, okay?
I'm being bossy. Sorry. I'm able to push them to their level and include sports and different things. This is the teacher said of the boys she teaches for part of the day before swapping with a reading and social studies teacher to work with the girls. She added that she liked to turn math sessions into games because boys like competition. Apparently, they've never met any teenage or 20-something girls, actually any women in general, because we don't like competition. Really.
Yeah.
The boys in her class appeared busy and eager to work. J. Hem Jones said he preferred a girl-free zone because girls are bossy. Down the hall in a third grade reading and social studies class, Ruth, I can't pronounce her last name, who was overseeing all girls at the time, showed a crate she kept in the storage room of fuzzy pastel sweaters for girls, saying they were more likely to feel cold than boys. They haven't met my son, who wears a hoodie in the house at all times. For spelling and vocabulary lessons incorporating physical activity, she brought out hula hoops and small rubber balls for the girls. The boys would get yo-yos and bats and badminton rackets. She said she taught the same curriculum at both, but changed the background details, so when playing music in class, for example, she tends to put on Michael Jackson for the boys, switching to more soothing music by groups like Enigma for girls. And this is what happens when you segregate classes.
So my daughter this week has really gotten into Linkin Park and other 90s scream music. She's 12. She's 12.
You go.
He's a juggalo.
Yep.
It's absolutely insane, and it's very outdated because honestly, in today's world, I mean, girls are actually they're sexually aggressive in teenagers. It's much different than when I was a teenager. That's how quickly we adapt to new cultural, to these cultural changes. And I think these are reverting. and it's harmful in my opinion. You know, things like the boys are trying to impress the girls, and the girls are trying to impress the boys, and we've removed that variable out of the way. So they've had fewer problems with discipline. Well, how are these kids going to learn to work with each other if they never interact with the opposite sex, because at school they're not allowed to?
Awkwardly.
Unless they're their parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids are more than just their test scores.
Yeah.
And if kids in single-sex environments do have higher test scores, which I'm still unconvinced of, but let's say some of those studies that show that they're more likely to graduate from college or things like that are correct, we need to know why that is and fix that problem. It could be that they're more likely to graduate from college because they're not doing anything else, because they're not interacting with each other, and they're not well-rounded human beings. I just don't see this as a solution to anything. And it angers me a lot because I think it's extremely harmful. If you're going to reinforce these gender stereotypes, then what happens to the poor kids who are not that don't fit the gender norms?
Yeah, I realize a lot of the examples I keep bringing up. I mean, this is the same problem with this. Is that anecdotes aren't evidence, and a lot of this stuff that they're mentioning in the article, it just seemed like, well, they tried it and they went around and interviewed a few people and said, yeah, it's great. I think it's awesome.
That's exactly how education works.
Yeah.
Actually, in this country, education seems to follow whatever the latest fad is.
Yeah.
It's very pop education, just like pop psych, and is a serious problem, I think, because it gets implemented. These things get implemented with these ideas without being tested. And what we have right now are grad schools teaching teachers crap like learning styles.
Yeah.
Because that's what's in their textbooks. Their textbooks are filled with this stuff.
Yeah. And my other question is, are they selling a learning process? Because it seems like another thing that happens is that somebody has some kind of package teaching, like books and
if not,
method.
it's right around the corner.
Yes, we're selling the super deluxe method, and you can, and it really works by science. Only $3.95 a month.
I would not be surprised to find that, actually.
Yeah. So.
Except that it's not a real popular theory. I mean, it's not happening everywhere.
It's countercultural at this point. It does
seem
the tide.
A little bit.
Yeah. Although in some states.
Well, in some states it's been banned, and actually there are guidelines by the DOE now that make it pretty difficult. They can do it if they meet some certain requirements. One of them is to show evidence that it would be beneficial. Yeah. That's actually easy because you can just show the cherry-pick studies. That's how it works, So it's easy to get that approved, even though the consensus science basically says it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't help, and it doesn't hurt in terms of academics, but it doesn't help. But
it would cost money.
It does cost money, and they have to meet certain guidelines, including they have to measure the differences, and they can't make it mandatory. So schools can offer it, but they can't force kids into it.
Well, in the interest of trying to fit everything in, because we've gone kind of long, and the fact that Edward is here, I'm going to let Eve do hers real quick.
Here.
Yay! And keep in mind, wow, we're running long. But go ahead, because I've been looking forward to this, and I've got the slides primed. So go.
Okay. From time to time, a story will appear in the news or on social media that claims archaeologists have unearthed vampire graves. And sometimes these are questioned. For instance, a few years ago, a skeleton in a Venice plague pit was found with a brick in her mouth, and it was claimed that this indicated that she was considered a vampire, that the brick was put there so she wouldn't bite. But then others questioned whether the brick was actually placed there intentionally or if it had fallen into the grave. However, anomalous or deviant burials are not uncommon. They're found in many different cultures over a long period of time. And these burials do suggest that sometimes people feared that certain dangerous dead could exert a malign influence over the living, though we might not always want to go full vampire in our assumptions, but in some way they exerted a malign influence. Among the common types of deviant burials, those with the head severed, particularly if the head is then somewhere other than where it would usually be, other forms of dismemberment, prone burial, wooden or iron stakes or nails or other objects placed on or around the body to pinion it in the grave, stones placed on the body, and bound limbs. From the archaeology, it's difficult often to tell why certain people were considered dangerous after death, though sometimes there are clues. Some Anglo-Saxon women were buried with grave goods that suggest that they were very high status, but they were also deviant burials. And among the objects found with them were some that suggested they were cunning women or practitioners of magic. So their burials suggest that on the one hand that they were respected and had high status in the community, but that they were also feared after death. Usually, though, it's hard to make that determination. With beheadings, was the decapitation the cause of death, or a way to stop the dead from rising, or both? Folklore and historical accounts provide many reasons why people become vampires: violent death, particularly murder or suicide, being born with a caul, being a werewolf, being unpleasant.
Wait. Being a werewolf makes you become a vampire?
After death. If werewolves after death become vampires.
Whoa, that wasn't
It's
in...
all coming together.
Yeah.
Oh.
Don't tell the Twilight people. So there are many reasons.
Did they still sparkle?
Yeah, I don't know. They're hard to sparkle under fur, but...
Only if you don't put a brick in their mouth.
Yeah. But again, there haven't been many cases in which the historical record has been really matched with the archaeological record. Recently, however, researchers have been looking into vampire graves in a cemetery in Drawsko, Poland, which I'm sure I pronounced wrong. It's actually Poland. The cemetery was in use in the 17th and 18th centuries. Of the approximately 285 burials, 6 bodies had either sickles or rocks or both laid across their throats or abdomens. And I have 2 slides, one of a sickle burial, one of a rock burial. So if the corpses revived, the sickles would cut off their heads or rip out their innards.
I assume that's a sickle.
Yeah.
If the corpses were live?
If they came back from the dead, if they sat up, they'd cut their heads off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would they
still be corpses if they're alive?
They're living corpses.
Walking corpses, yeah. They're the Walking Dead. And the rocks would keep them
dead, I guess.
from biting or attacking, presumably. But why these 6? They were integrated with the rest of the burials. There was nothing overtly, aside from like the sickles, to show that, that they were separate from the rest of the community.
I'm getting better.
So a team of 4 researchers led by Leslie Gregorica of the University of South Alabama studied the vampire remains in relation to the normative burials. They hypothesized that the vampires may have been migrants to the area, which is a reasonable hypothesis. Outsiders are sometimes viewed with suspicion.
Vampires. Migrant vampires?
Migrant vampires.
Yeah.
Would taken the jobs from our vampires.
It took our jobs.
But for instance, in the sagas of Icelanders, many Droiger, the Old Norse undead, particularly the nastiest ones, are from somewhere other than Iceland. They're from Sweden or Orkney or the Hebrides or something like that. So to test their hypothesis, they compared the radiogenic strontium isotope ratios from the tooth enamel of the vampires to that of 58 non-vampire skeletons from the cemetery. And in brief, there was no difference. The vampires were local. They were completely within the normal range of the rest of the burials. There were 3 non-vampire males who were not local, but there was nothing remotely strange about their burials. So there must have been something else that marked these corpses as dangerous. The authors suggest in their abstract and then briefly in their paper that the deviant burials may have been related to cholera outbreaks that were common in the area at the time. And again, this is reasonable, it's plausible. Before germ theory, people didn't know how disease was spread and had no effective treatments for bacterial or viral infections, even if they did know how they were spread. So there are many inaccurate and superstitious explanations proposed and different ways of trying to control outbreaks. So one of the things that happened was that it was very common to blame death on the dead, basically. Mm-hmm. So the first person to die in an epidemic in some way caused the epidemic. Again, Icelandic Droger outbreaks are very commonly connected with sickness. The Serbian vampire cases of Peter Blagojevich and Arnold Paul, which brought vampires to the attention of Western Europe, those involved epidemics. The rash of exhumations and heart burnings and ingestings that occurred in New England in the 18th and 19th century, that was associated with tuberculosis.
I think you take Prilosec for that.
Yeah. So this seems a perfectly reasonable theory, but there's absolutely no evidence for it at all. Cholera leaves no evidence on the bones, unlike tuberculosis in the 90s, which can. In the 90s, a graveyard was accidentally uncovered in Griswold, Connecticut. One of the bodies had previously, sometime in the past, been dug up, disarticulated, and then the bones were left in a skull and crossbones pattern. And examination of the bones showed that that man had almost certainly had tuberculosis. But cholera, you can't tell. Gregorica et al. Also point out that the cemetery doesn't appear to be an epidemic cemetery. So really, we still don't know why these 6 were thought to be vampires. What can be tested has been tested, but the results haven't really provided an explanation. They've eliminated one explanation. Despite that, Huffington Post headline said, "Vampire skeleton mystery may finally have been solved." Newsweek went with, "Polish vampires may actually have been cholera's first victims." Discovery News, "Buried Polish vampires likely had cholera." And the Daily Mail, "Polish vampires were killed by cholera," in all caps. Tests reveal suspected bloodsuckers were actually early victims of the epidemic. Which really, the article doesn't say. It's mentioned as a possibility, but just as a possibility. The headlines really should read, "Tests show vampires were local. Scientists don't know why they were considered vampires." But that just isn't that catchy. And this is nothing against Gregorica and her co-authors. They had a hypothesis. They tested their hypothesis. They falsified their hypothesis. Good for them. Knowledge has increased. They also, in passing, suggested another possible and plausible explanation. But as they admit, it's unprovable and unfalsifiable. It is plausible, but there are many other plausible explanations as well. So this is, again, what happens when scholarship gets in these sweaty, feverish hands of headline writers. Somehow it comes out as something completely different from the actual story.
Sweaty, feverish hands.
Yeah.
Yes. Tasty. Any questions on that one? I thought they still dug up graves and stalked a corpse if vampirism was suspected in Eastern Europe. Alpha on Twitter.
Yeah, apparently there are still places where there is vampire belief, active vampire belief.
A lot of rotting corpses today.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of rotting corpses. And on that note, I'm going to switch over to Tim.
Yeah.
Can you talk about rotting corpses, Tim?
Rotting corpses.
Just rumors of rotting corpses.
Rumors of rotting corpses.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, I talked about a new tool called Emergent.info, which tracks not quite so much rumors on Twitter, but stuff that often originates on Twitter and Facebook and gets into the media, and Craig Silverman has built this tool to track them and kind of get some numerics on how fast are they being debunked or confirmed, and when they are debunked, does the debunk travel as far as the original? And since then, I've noticed two other projects that are kind of interesting that are kind of doing a similar thing, but more specifically targeted at Twitter. And if you go to my first slide, it's a screenshot from a tool that's being built by some folks at Wellesley College, and it's called Twitter Trails, and it looks superficially kind of similar to the main display on Emergent, where they have a story that came from a tweet, and on the right-hand side they indicate some icons that indicate how much this story is propagating, how much it's getting retweeted, and how much skepticism is being shown about it on Twitter, whether or not people think it's true or think it's false. And they had an interesting blog post a few weeks ago where they claim that simply by measuring the metrics about how these things get retweeted and who retweets from who, that they can actually kind of detect when a story is false. And I think basically what they're detecting is when people on Twitter start to push back on the story, because they're doing some sentiment analysis of the tweets. So it sort of depends on there being skeptics out there to push back on these things. But
sounds like a little bit of a consensus analysis.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, and I think it's early on in it. If you drill into these stories, and if you go to my next slide, you can get a whole different display. Like this was an older story that I saw, and actually they've obviously been altering the algorithms a little bit as they go, because when I first saw this story, this is a classic skeptic pseudoscience story, because if you go and read that article, it's this whole nonsense about demonizing fluoride, and it's something about fluoride attacks your brain and it actually turns your consciousness off, so you become this
that explains a lot.
I don't know. And as you can see, this particular tweet got 143 retweets and 106 favorites, so it was getting some traction in some areas. But they considered it insignificant, because if you drilled in on this story, they can actually show you a graph of who's retweeting who, and it really wasn't that very many accounts were getting it. And when I first looked at this story, it said, the skepticism said that people agreed, that they thought this story was true. But now it says too little data, so I think they're kind of altering their algorithms. But it's kind of an interesting area of research. Essentially, the title of their recent blog post was, let me see if I get it right, "False rumors do not propagate like true ones." I don't know what a true rumor is. Well, I guess you can have a true rumor. But they're basically just doing it with math. And around the same time, I saw another one. Now, this is an actual tool. You can go to twittertrails.com, I think. I'll have the link in the show notes. And actually play around with the tool and drill in. And when you drill in on the stories, you can actually see who's retweeting and kind of see all the data that they're collecting. So it's kind of interesting to play with, just like Emergent. The other one, yeah?
I'm just wondering if they account for things like reliability. When we do consensus analysis in social science, we look for consensus. We don't. Every person's answer isn't weighted the same.
Right.
It's weighted based on how much they agree on a number of other things with other people. So you get this. Some people have a great deal of cultural knowledge, and some people are kind of clueless. And the ones who have a great deal of cultural knowledge will all agree with each other. And so you don't need a very large sample to find out either.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing there, or even if there is anything you could do there on Twitter, not actually knowing who some of these people are. I guess maybe you could do certain things with looking back into history and things like verified accounts and stuff like that. The other paper that I wanted to talk about isn't actually a tool you can play with, but it's a paper you can read, and it was sort of this same. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you a graph from their paper. It's sort of a similar intent, but kind of on steroids, where they're collecting like basically every piece of numeric data they possibly can about a series of tweets, like how much the two people who were involved in a retweet interacted with each other prior, how many followers people have, what the sentiment of the language in the tweet is, and stuff like that. And they claim that basically by collecting all this data and then visualizing it and using different colors and patterns on the screen to show the thread and how things fanned out in retweet storms, that they can also detect basically false rumors, that bad information being propagated, because it gets propagated in weird ways amongst people that don't normally talk with each other. That when people who trust each other pass along good information, you can sort of see that, you see the same patterns going on, whereas these crazy false rumors get propagated in weird ways, so you'll see people retweeting stuff who had never interacted with that person before. And so it's a similar thing. I think this tool required a little bit more personal interaction, because there's actually a YouTube demo that I'll link to where they show the person. It's intended as a tool that a data analyst could use to say, hey, there's this thread on Twitter, people are talking about blah, can you analyze it and see if maybe you can determine whether or not the story is true or not. So it was kind of interesting line of research, just not so much trying to debunk the actual contents, but see how false data propagates versus how true data propagates. But even if the tools don't turn out to be very useful, they may be useful for skeptics, just from the standpoint of, hey, I need something to blog about. Hey, you can go to Emergent or you can go to Twitter Trails, and you can see a list of stuff that's going viral on Twitter, and you can sort it by skepticism if you want to see the stuff people are already being skeptical about on Twitter Trails. And you might find a story like, I had not seen that fluoride erases your consciousness story. I had not seen that before. I saw it on Twitter Trails, and it's certainly worthy of a skeptic blog post. So it might be...
Or at least a gigantic collective groan.
Yeah. Well, it was already... I did a little digging back, which they didn't do. Emergent tries to find multiple stories on different websites and sort of see who's pushing one side of the story and who's pushing the other, and which side is winning. Twitter Trails doesn't do that. It focuses entirely on the tweets. But if you actually dug into the content of that fluoride story, you'd find that the story was actually a copy of a copy of a copy of a story, and the original one was like on several websites away. So it'd be interesting to sort of follow that through. Wow, that's a set of eyeballs right there. My cat.
Cat's hiding.
So that's all I got. If you're skeptic and you're looking for something to blog about, check out Emergent Info is a good place, and also Twitter Trails, a good place to find weird crap that's passed around on Twitter.
I have a quick question. Do either of these sites publish, or at least have some kind of details on the algorithms they use?
Yeah, they're both the two that I talked about tonight are in the computer science academia, and FluxFlow, the paper was presented at a data visualization conference in November, and I think there are multiple papers underway on the Twitter Trails project. I know there's at least one on the false rumors propagating differently than true rumors.
It definitely does sound like somebody's PhD project, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely PhD stuff, and it may never turn into anything very practical, but it's kind of interesting from a skeptic point of view to see this sort of work being done.
Interesting. Very, very cool. And Twitter are using... Because it just seems cool to me, because of things like social media sites, we've essentially convinced everyone to document lots of things that would normally just be going into the air somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's this great big data set you can analyze, which I think is just very cool what you can possibly glean. And in the future, the good side of all this data collecting that's going on seems to me like learning more about us as a species, as how we interact socially and how ideas propagate and things like that. So
yeah, definitely.
As opposed to learning how best you can sell socks to people. Yes, or catch people at doing things they shouldn't be doing. Okay, so that's our show. We went a little bit long, but not too long. We did pretty good, and Eve came back and did her thing. Bam! That's awesome. Let's do our wrap up, because that's the last thing we have to do. And I don't see any more questions. Checking real quick. Nope. Let's see. We've got announcements. We've got a trivia question. Did anybody get a trivia question?
Yes, several people got it. I think 2 people got it right around the same time. Nathan got it on Twitter and Pierre on YouTube, but Bevan Red also got it on YouTube. The author of Bad Science and Bad Pharma is none other than Ben Goldacre.
Yep.
He's a great guy to follow, and check out his All Trials campaign. He's campaigning to get the pharma companies to release all their data, not just the successful trials.
Yep.
Because it could make a huge difference in how we choose what drugs work.
Yep, that's true. Okay. And as far as the secondary thing, way to go. Oh, who got it first? Was it Nathan?
I don't know who got it.
Yeah? Nathan, I saw Nathan do first. Well, all you guys, great job on the trivia question. The 2 things behind me. Now, everyone got.
The one on the left, our left.
Die Hard is the best Christmas time movie ever. If you don't watch it every year, watch it every year. So there, I'm telling you to do it. You do it. The other one is on my list of Christmas Eve movies that I watch every year. It's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer, he's awesome in that role. It's worth a watch if you haven't watched it. It's a lot of fun.
That's why I didn't.
Nobody got that one, so sorry, no prize for you.
Prize?
It's like
next week.
You didn't win the non-existent prize.
No. Shh. They don't know that.
Oh, sorry.
So announcements. Announcements. We got a couple quick. Oh, a correction. Yes, pointed out on Twitter. Alex pointed out that the launch tomorrow for Orion is in the morning. Actually, I looked it up while we were chatting. And I tweeted out the link to the Kennedy Space Center page. They have a time of 7:04 a.m., but those things can change. So
yeah,
I think the pre-launch stuff starts earlier than that. So if you want to watch it in the morning.
Yeah, if you're watching live, the countdown timer on the NASA site reads 9 hours and 51 minutes right now.
Okay, so that puts it somewhere around 8 o'clock.
Yep.
Yeah. So announcements. The only thing we have is, where are the announcements in there? Okay. Bob and Tim are both on Skepticality this week, so go check that out.
Yep. Oh, and if you, just a FYI, those of you who may have downloaded Skepticality right when it came out late last night, about 24 hours ago, you might want to re-download the episode because there was a goof-up. Originally, Susan's segment wasn't in there.
Oh.
Even though it was in the show notes. But Derek fixed that, so you can re-download the episode and get it with Susan. If you don't have Susan's voice, then you've got the early version of the episode. Sorry about that.
Okie doke. And now it's book time. Who's going first?
I will.
Go, Barbara. Go, Barbara. Go.
Some people have a legitimate reason to feel depressed, but not me. I just woke up one day feeling arbitrarily sad and helpless.
Aww.
It's disappointing to feel sad for no reason. Sadness can be almost pleasantly indulgent when you have a way to justify it. You can listen to a sad music and imagine yourself as the protagonist in a dramatic movie. You can gaze out at a window out the window while you're crying and think, this is so sad. I can't even believe how sad this whole situation is. I bet even a reenactment of my sadness would bring an entire theater audience to tears. But my sadness didn't have a purpose. Listening to sad music and imagining that my life was a movie just made me feel kind of weird because I couldn't really get behind the idea of a movie where the character was sad for no reason.
Edward?
A little later, the people found that Glaum was not lying quiet. Terrible things happened. Many men fell unconscious at the sight of him, and others lost their sanity. Soon after Christmas, people began to see him walking about the farmhouse and were terrified by him. Many of them fled away. Then Glaum began to sit astride the roof at night and beat it so furiously with his heels that the house came near to breaking. Soon he was walking about day and night, and men hardly found the courage to go up to the valley even on urgent business. All this was a great calamity for the people in the district.
Calamity. Go, Bob.
Pay attention to your robotic staff. They may be beneath your contempt as well as beneath your eye level. Watch for the telltale signs. For the following telltale signs in the days and weeks before your robots
I
run
know
amok.
this book.
Robots.
Sudden lack of interest in menial labor, unexplained disappearances, unwillingness to be shut down, repetitive stabbing movements, and constant talk of human killing.
I love that book. Go, Tim.
About 6 years ago, I went to the Gap to buy a pair of jeans. I tend to wear my jeans until they're falling apart, so it had been quite a while since my last purchase. A nice young salesperson walked up to me and asked if she could help. I want a pair of jeans. 32-28, I said. Do you want them slim fit, easy fit, relaxed fit, baggy, or extra baggy? She replied. Do you want them stone-washed, acid-washed, or distressed? Do you want them button fly or zipper fly? Do you want them faded or regular? I was stunned. A moment or two later, I sputtered out something like, I just want regular jeans. You know, the kind that used to be the only kind. It turned out she didn't know. But after consulting one of her older colleagues, she was able to figure out what regular jeans used to be, and she pointed me in the right direction.
What were the regular jeans?
Doesn't say.
You'll have to read more to find out.
It's out-of-date information anyway, so...
Yeah.
Yes. This is starting with a quote. Early in the next decade, a set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit. And by 2025, we expect new spacecraft design for long journeys to allow us to begin the first ever crewed missions beyond the moon into deep space. So we'll start by sending astronauts to an asteroid for the first time in history. By the mid-2030s, I believe we can send humans to orbit Mars and return them safely to Earth. And a landing on Mars will follow, and I expect to be around to see it, unquote, the president explained, greeted by bursts of applause throughout the rollout of his prospective missions. What's your book, Barbara?
I think Tim has actually read from this before. Hyperbole and a Half?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Great book.
Great webcomic. Edward.
Greta Saga, translated by Denton Fox and Herman Paulson.
Oh, yeah.
About a droider. Well, that's it.
It's devastating. It was catastrophic. No, what was the word? Never mind. Go ahead, Bob.
Calamity.
I know this book. Can I say what this book is before you give it away? Oh, no, you're going to show it. It is How to Survive a Robot Uprising by last name Wilson.
Daniel
Wilson, yes. He was just interviewed on Monster Talk like less than a month ago, and it's a really good interview. Go check it out. So, he's a PhD roboticist.
At Carnegie Mellon, you can tell because all the robots there are at Carnegie Mellon.
Right.
So he's doing product placement for
Little bit.
employer.
That's what he knows about.
Yep.
Well, that is a big school for robot stuff.
Yeah,
Robots.
Robots. Go ahead, Tim. What's your book?
Mine was The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less by Barry Schwartz.
I haven't
Great
read
book.
that one.
Great
Interesting.
book.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it.
Awesome. Mine is, this came out last year. It is by an astronaut you may know, Buzz Aldrin, and it's his take on getting to Mars, called Mission to Mars. It's an interesting read. It starts out with his meeting the president and going in and learning about what's going to happen with the Mars mission and all that jazz. And also, if you really like the book and like Buzz, you go buy one of his Get Your Ass to Mars t-shirts. They're awesome. So there you go. Is that everything?
My
Is that all our
Bus Punch
stuff?
video is still getting views.
Yeah. Yeah.
2.3 million views.
Yep, you
Unreal.
can see
He
him
gets
punch.
comments almost every day.
Yep.
Wow.
Awesome.
I had a little bit of a tiny little Mabus update.
Oh,
He
cool.
was supposed to be in court like 2 weeks ago on Friday, on November, I guess 2 weeks ago. Yeah, November 21st. His lawyer was late, or somebody ate somebody's homework. I don't know. But anyway, most of the people showed up, but by the time they got everybody there wasn't time in the judge's schedule, so they postponed to February. So we got to wait again. So.
That's the way it always is. I swear,
Yeah.
the legal system moves so freaking slow in this country.
Yeah.
Actually,
Or
even in
Canada.
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 Yeah, in
Yeah,
Canada it
Canada.
seems to be even slower. I mean, this arrest was November 2012, so we're over 2 years since this arrest, and his original arrest was a year before that.
Unreal.
I think what the problem is that they're so polite, they're just all standing by the door going, oh, no, you first. Oh, no.
Are you sure this day is okay for
I'm
you?
sorry. I'm sorry.
We'll
You can do it
reschedule.
as a day if you like. Yeah.
Scheduled.
Oh, rescheduled. Yes, I can't
Yeah.
say that. Okay. Well, that's that. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is the logo.
Everybody.
This is the music. I like my guitar. Does your SDD thing do that? No, it's a delay.
SDD.
Yes. The Virtual Skeptics is an independent production of whatstheharm.net, Skeptical Humanities, myself, ICBS Everywhere, and Doubtful News. Our logo is designed by Sarah Mayhew at sarahmayhew.com, and our theme music is by Music Hint and used with